I've been riding e-bikes for nearly 3 years now, and it is time to share what life is actually like riding and owning these fancy electric chariots, both on the trail and having them in your garage. And to be 100% honest with you, before having one of these, I never would have guessed what the best part would be, and especially what the worst part would be about owning an e-bike. So let's get into it. And we are gonna start off with the very best part, which was not only a shocking realization for me, but little trigger alert for the ragey e-bike haters out there. You might want to cover up any sensitive electronics you have, because what I'm about to say just might blow up your brain mind. The e-bike is hands down the best fitness tool for mountain bikers. Not joking, here's why. See, a couple of years ago, I only had a few short weeks to physically prepare myself for a really cool riding opportunity in the high Andes Mountains of Peru, where we were gonna be pedaling at altitudes between 12,000 and 15,000 feet of elevation daily. Yeah, I needed a lot of help and quick, so I went to a professional trainer to get their advice on what I can do in such a short amount of time, and what he said surprised me. He told me to go and get on a bike, put my heart rate into a relatively low zone 2, which for me, I think it was about 135 BPM, and keep it in that zone 2 for 1 to 2 hours every day. As he said, that will be the most effective way to build up the most amount of endurance possible in the shortest amount of time. This is what professional athletes of pretty much any sort do on the regular. You see it from downhill mountain bikers, enduro mountain bikers, obviously road bikers. They all hop on those spin bikes or those road bikes and churn away at a relatively low heart rate for long periods of time. But for me at that time, my only option was to get on an exercise bike in a gym, and it was so incredibly boring. I just couldn't stick with it. And with how punchy and spiky the pedaling efforts are on a regular mountain bike, I knew that that wasn't gonna work either. But fast forward, with this modern e-bike I'm sitting on right now, the coolest part about the whole thing is how I get to decide how much effort I put in on any given ride. I get to decide exactly what I want my heart rate to be through a full ride. So now I can go out there and ride punchy mountain bike trails, and if I have it in the right mode, I can keep my heart rate exactly where I want it to be, nice and steady, allowing me to get those like core, I'll call them like deep cycle workouts, while not being bored to tears. And you really start to get to know what modes on your bike are best for what. On this particular one, it's an eeeebs Oso and has like the Bosch system, but I'm assuming this applies to other e-bikes as well. I don't actually know. But so like the green eco power mode, if I keep it in that mode and I keep it in a couple harder gears, I can keep my heart rate between 150 and 160 riding with anybody on regular bikes. Or you can choose, one of the top 2 mega high power modes like e-mtb or of course turbo, and keep your heart rate way, way down there if you wanted to. But when it comes to building up like a base level fitness, I've found that the blue mode, or Tour Plus, to be exactly what I dreamed of having all those years ago. In that mode, I am able to keep my heart rate like perfectly in zone 2 because it only adds additional power when you need it. And so it just sort of evens out your effort throughout the whole ride, no matter what's happening. And the really important second part of that, because I know I can pick and choose the amount of effort I want to put in on a ride by ride basis or even a climb by climb basis, I actually get out to ride trails way more often than I ever have before, which ups my fitness even further. And not only my fitness, but my downhill riding skills, because I'm just hitting way more downhills. Let's see here. Whoop, 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 whoop. Don't fall over. All right, a couple rapid fire questions from you all that came in. Do I ever miss regular bikes? Yes, and I will tell you when I do and why I do in a quick second here. What do I do at downhill mountain bike parks, like at Whistler? Do I ride the e-bike? At least with the eeeebs Oso, the one that I have, it's like a burly, do everything mountain bike that has a motor, and so definitely ride it at downhill mountain bike parks. I have mine in the extended travel mode, so I've got 180 in the front and 170 in the back. Perfect bike park specs. But what I'll often do in the situation, if I know I'm just doing lift access, I'll take the battery out. Why not? Pull the battery out. With the Osos, the battery cover is attached to the battery itself. And so once I take the battery out, I just use a little strap. I don't even know I'm supposed to do this, but I pull the battery out, put the battery cover back on the frame, and just use a strap to strap it on there. And then voila, you got yourself a pretty sick park bike. Do I think I'm damaging the trails with my e-bike? Definitely not. Before owning one, I probably would have said, yeah, probably. But in reality, that's just not the case. And the reason for that is that this is not a motorbike. It doesn't have a ridiculous, insane amount of power to it. They say it basically brings a regular person's leg strength to the strength of like a World Cup level cross-country athlete. And so where we live here in Canmore, Alberta, there's a place called the Canmore Nordic Center. And it's where a huge amount of our riding zone is. And at the Canmore Nordic Center, e-bikes aren't allowed, but they hold national and international cross-country events all the time where they bring in like the best of the best. And all of those riders riding on those trails have the same amount of power as I do on this thing. And so no, there's no more damage to the trails than anything else. I thought that maybe with an e-bike you'd be spinning out a lot and like kind of grinding down the trails a bit. I never spin out on this bike. I do have like beefier, knobbier tires than I maybe normally would on a regular bike, just to make sure I have tons of traction and I'm never breaking loose. So yeah, no extra damage being done here. But it's a good question. But going back to the whole downhill thing on an e-bike, or even just doing a lot of downhill riding on an e-bike, what I've found, and you know, like we're fortunate enough to be sponsored by eeeebs and we have access to regular bikes as well. So in my garage, I have e-bikes and I also have regular bikes like the HD6 and the Ritmo. And let me tell you, when you've done a whole bunch of downhill riding on an e-bike and then you switch back over to a regular bike that's like 25 pounds lighter, it's sort of like training with a weighted bat or like running with a weighted backpack, all of a sudden taking that extra weight off. Let me tell you, all of a sudden you are sending that downhill section like the earth has half as much gravity all of a sudden. And I can definitely see why a lot of World Cup downhill racers train on e-bikes. Now, of course, having said all that, owning an e-bike can be dangerous for fitness if not used wisely. When I first got the e-bike, I found myself just doing the same exact rides that I normally would, maybe doing some of the higher elevation stuff that I wouldn't normally. But if you're just doing the exact same loop but on an e-bike, all of a sudden you're out riding for only a third of the amount of time, especially in the higher modes. You're just gonna lose out on some fitness because your ride's gonna be over way faster. So one thing I definitely recommend is just getting out there for longer rides. We're doing 2 or 3 laps of the loop that you would normally do. Around here we have some really awesome high elevation stuff, which normally, even in my best physical condition, would be really, really, really difficult for me to get up there and go and see. Now I take this big rig up there, it is a blast, and I'm getting a solid workout because I'm just being out there pedaling for long enough. Now let's hear from Beth, because she has seen more benefit from an e-bike than anybody else I know.
Because of my health issues, ankylosing spondylitis, chronic migraine attacks, my energy levels just vary day to day a lot. But having an e-bike means that I can get out way more. And so it's actually been a big tool in just making mountain biking more accessible for me, no matter how I'm feeling. So one of my only experiences with e-bikes was watching people fly past me up the hills. And so I assumed that when I got an e-bike, I would be flying up the hills and leaving my friends behind and not have friends to ride with. But as it turns out, you can actually turn down the power on an e-bike and you get to decide how fast you want to go and how much power you want to have. And so you can actually ride with your friends and hang out with them, whether you're on an e-bike and they're on a regular bike or not. And maybe that sounds kind of silly, like obviously you can turn down the power on an e-bike, but when the only experience you've had is someone flying past you really fast on an e-bike
By themselves,
you just don't know any different, and I didn't. So with an e-bike, I have a choice to ride at the intensity I'm up for that day, which means I can actually get out more often than ever. If I'm feeling a little bit tired, I can still go out for a ride. If I had to say one thing I don't like about the e-bike, it would have to be the weight of it. It is significantly heavier than a regular bike. Just having to lift it and move it around is actually a challenge for me. And so, yeah, the other day we were riding on the trail and there was a down tree and I had to lift it over. Those are just things to think about if you're, what style of bike rack you have. Anytime you have to lift it is gonna be a different experience.
Okay, so now here are my top 3 things that I love the most about owning. I mean, everybody uses e-bikes differently, but here are my personal top 3 reasons for loving an e-bike, and then my top 3 gripes about e-biking. And I'll end with the very, very biggest one that was super surprising for me. Number 1, the e-bike makes filming so much easier. And I know this is a very specific to me kind of problem, but a lot of the times, you know, we're not filming trail riding videos so much anymore. There's a lot of like how-to content, like how to jump and how to corner and all those things. And typically we have to do a lot of pedaling to get to where we need to be. And then after that, you're doing dozens of laps, like hiking the bike back up, filming a section, hiking back up, filming a section, all for the next day to 2 days.
So you just let off there? You let off at the sign. Man, this is the best part, honestly. I'm not doing anything. This is so good.
And being able to either get towed by this thing or just be on the e-bike, we're able to get more footage and better footage because we're not freaking exhausted by the time we get to the top of lap 1. Number 2, we live in a town that is quite literally filled with Olympians, like actual Olympians, and just super, super fit people in general. And so for somebody like me who's in like decent shape, gets asked by most of the locals around here to go for a ride, a lot of times I'll say no, because they're gonna have a miserable time because I'm holding everybody up, and I'm gonna have a miserable time because I'm on death's door because my heart rate is at like 200 the whole time. Honestly, the fitness level of people around here is ridiculous. This thing right here is the great equalizer. Now I can say yes to any ride with anyone, and I know that everyone's gonna have a great time. The third real big one that I love the most about this bike is that it turns what otherwise would be kind of like pedally, boring, flat trails into essentially super fun downhill trails, because you're able to carry so much more speed on those sections that would normally be super boring. There are so many trails in my area that I look at in a totally different way now. They're all a blast. Heck, even a lot of the uphills are fun. All right, and now for the dark side of owning e-bikes. You all know, if you've seen any of my review videos that have to do with products that complicate my riding experience, they generally don't get a very good review from me. And for the most part, these things, you don't really have to worry about them much at all, but there are way more systems at play. You gotta keep that battery charged. There's just more to go wrong on an e-bike, of course. We've had really, really good luck with these things. I've had to take one of them into the shop once to a official Bosch service center and had them do something, I don't even know. And I think that's probably the part that like bugs me the most, is that just like with newer cars, I don't really know what to do under the hood, but like, you know, from the old 80s cars that I used to drive, everything's just right there. I know how to fix these things, but there's just technology going on over here that I just don't know what to do with. Oh, side note, somebody noticed that I was running GX transmission on my Oso, and a couple years ago I put out a video about GX Axis, and I hated it. I thought it was like really bad idea. But transmission specifically on an e-bike, I think is a great idea, because one of the things that's happened to me since owning an e-bike is you very quickly chew through drivetrains. I've been through one set of absolutely everything on this bike already, like ground down to the nub. But we swapped it out with the GX transmission, which actually comes on these bikes now, like the Osos. And for regular bikes, I think transmission, again, I don't think it's a very good idea at all. It doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever, especially for like high performance athletes where they need to like shift really fast. Anyways, that's for a whole nother video. But for an e-bike, the GX transmission system I think is awesome because it only shifts when it's ready to shift. So when you're under load with all these watts going on, I'm wearing through this whole system way slower than I did on the previous system, which was like a standard GX drivetrain. But yeah, wearing through parts faster, wearing through back tires faster, wearing through the chain and especially the rear cassette, all that kind of stuff. You're just gonna wear through stuff faster on an e-bike. All right, now for the part that I dislike the very most about an e-bike ride. It's kind of hard to describe, and anytime I've ever shared this with somebody, most of the time they just stare at me blankly. But when I'm on an e-bike, on a very e-bike ride, like in one of the higher power modes, and of course, like let's just think back to when anybody first gets on an e-bike. You put it into turbo mode and you haul arse up the trail. You pretty much keep it in turbo mode the entire time. Max power, go, go, go. And that is pretty fun. But right from the very first time that I did that in turbo mode on this bike behind me, I finished out the ride and I felt like something was missing. I felt like I missed out on something that I love about mountain biking. And it was the part of the ride that I was most excited to delete. And I'm talking about the slow, quiet climb. When you're on your regular mountain bike, climbing on up the trail, things are slowed down, things are calm, things are quiet. Sure, you might be breathing through your eyeballs, but that, as I found out, is a really restorative time for me. And when I got on the e-bike, threw it in turbo mode and went for it, it felt like I was just smashing downhill the entire time. That's even like the little phrase for this bike behind me, downhill both ways, which I think is really, really cool and fun in a lot of cases. But if I'm just taking e-biking in that sort of aspect, where it's just turbo mode everywhere, you're just on high alert from beginning to end of that ride. Because you have to focus on the uphills like you normally would just have to do on the downhills. But on a regular ride, you know, 3/4 of the time you're on your bike, you're climbing. What I really love about a mountain bike ride is having those two things work well with each other. Having that slow, calm, quiet section of it where you have time to think through whatever's happened in your day or whatever, or chat with your friends. And then the opposite side of that, when you're flying downhill and you can only focus on what's going on in that exact moment in time. Having both is important to me. Maybe not for everybody, but definitely for me. And I never realized that until it was gone. Now, of course, fortunately, on these bikes, as I mentioned earlier, you can decide what you want to do, how much effort you want to put in. So you can go down and turn the whole bike off if you really want a true climb challenge, or you can just throw it in eco mode, like green mode, which honestly, if you ask me, just kind of picks up the slack of the extra weight of the bike. And so I've found myself, even though I have the ability to go and do a huge giant lap of my lunch ride in, I think it was like 26 minutes start to finish, I just don't really do that anymore. I leave turbo mode alone, other than like, you know, the straight parts just getting to the trail. But once I get there, I turn the power mode down and I'm able to just like chill out and think. So yeah, and through that, I think it just comes back to what I like the most about the e-bike is that I can choose whatever kind of ride I want to be on that day. It just gives you options. So I hope this was helpful for anybody looking into possible ownership of an e-bike. Let me know if you have any questions down below, or if anybody has any thoughts or suggestions like other e-bike owners that you want to put down in the comments section. You would bring huge value to all the viewers of this channel, and I appreciate it a lot. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.
So I don't wanna fight, no.